Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome to the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Everything looks good. Everyone, I hope you're having a great day because we have a great show planned for you where all hour we have Scott Schober. He is our cybersecurity expert. And, if you wanted to, feel safe and cuddly and warm, maybe today's show isn't for you because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of topics, a lot of news, and we are more than happy to discuss that with our resident expert. So obviously, a couple things before we get started with Scott Schober. The first thing will be, of course, will be computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from a link to our guest website, any articles, news stories, things like that. You can also find the social media contest that should be back up and running here shortly with Logitech, and of course the live video stream, which you can also find twitch.tv/computeramerica. All that and more. We have an article going up here soon. We'll let you know, of course, here on the show. And the last announcement I have to make is that every year, Computer America takes off about 2 weeks between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Our last show for this year will be December 21st, and we will be back bright and early as we come back. I think January 2nd will be our first day back. So if you are going to wonder why there are so many reruns and best ofs, I think we have about a solid week off. So from like a Saturday to like a Wednesday and like a week in the middle. So just a heads up, that's why that's going to happen. It's not unusual. And hey, hopefully you can join us here back for an entire new year of Computer America. So I think with all that said, we're just going to go ahead, jump right into our guest today. And that guest, as I mentioned before, and he has been a longtime guest here at Computer America. Actually, and if my notes are right, it's about 3 or 4 months ago. I think it was like our two-year anniversary. So yeah, it's quite a while. I'm happy to re-announce Mr. Scott Schober. He is the president, CEO, and author of Hacked Again, and of course, Berkeley Varitronics is his company. Scott, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, happy that you could join us. Hopefully you're doing well. Obviously a lot of the country's been hit by snow and stuff like that. Everything going well with you?
Doing well here. Yes, excellent.
Perfect.
Good weather so far.
That's what we like to hear. And obviously, you're on a bit early. Normally, you were on towards the end of the month, but we wanted to get you on one more time just to just grace us with your presence and just have fun with us. And hey, you came with a slew of topics. But before we get into the topics, why don't you go ahead and tell the nice folks what it is that you do during your day job and Hacked Again, that kind of thing. Like, what qualifies you to talk about cybersecurity?
You got it. I have a company that I'm running. We're 46 years old as a company. We're privately held. We design and provide wireless security tools. These are wireless threat detection tools that mainly sell to cybersecurity agencies and government agencies to keep them secure and keep out wireless threats of all types. I wrote a book, Hacked Again, which chronicles the details of my being a target as a cybersecurity expert and how I was compromised again and again, and some of the things that I learned in the process. And great to be back on and talk about some of the latest and greatest hacks, and hopefully share some thoughts here how people can stay safe.
All right. Yeah. And I think a good first one, hey, it's always nice to see your face because the first story that we have is actually coming from news12.com. And they wrote an article citing experts. And hey, experts in this case, well, let's just say I recognize that face. You looks like you gave an interview about keeping private through cell phones and through apps and things like that. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't think is even possible, which it might not be. I mean, hey, you're here to comment, but tell us about this article and what you had to say about staying private using smartphone apps.
Yeah, and I like the point actually you make. A lot of people don't realize that the apps that they're using are in fact tracking them. And this was a story that really broke, I guess, last week. New York Times broke the story, and then I had a couple interviews on this, but in this particular one here, I shared some of the information about how different apps that we innocently download each and every day, they track our location, and they record a lot of information about us, which then in turn is sold. And this is not necessarily anything new, but I think it's just waking people up to how bad of a problem it is. And I think that's what the kind of in a nutshell, what this story did is was really waking people up. I talked a little bit in the interview about the terms and conditions that we opt into and that we agree when we do download these different apps, and the importance of going on. And again, whether you're an Apple user or Android user, really doesn't matter, but going into your privacy settings and specifically looking at the locations, what you're allowing them to have access to. You actually have a slew of different settings, and you can actually say, hey, allow them to know where I am at any particular point in time, never allow them, or only while I'm actively using the app. So taking some control over the apps that we use and setting the proper permissions that we're comfortable with is very important. And one tip I share during the interview there is the importance of just, I call it cleaning house. Go through all those apps that are sitting on your mobile phone. If you haven't used them in the past month or so, maybe it's time that you delete them. Because the more apps that you have, the harder it is to stay on top of it. And really, ultimately, they're all trying to track us and learn our whereabouts, our interest in our purchases, you name it. So why give them any more information that you don't want to?
Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind, I think context is everything here because, giving this, I feel like giving this interview and just being very general and vague and just say that, you should do this, it's possible. Like, the fact that you give this interview on the heels of what the New York Times reported on, we actually covered that last week when it first broke, and we spent, I didn't plan on it, but I spent probably a good 40 minutes on that article alone. Yeah. It was really shocking. Like, even for someone who really understands what you're kind of giving up, I think the granular detail that the New York Times went into to show what advertisers are able to do with the data. And I guess something I want you to explain to our audience is that, being able to share your location, we often hear these data companies and whatnot say, oh, we've stripped all of your data of personally identifiable markers or whatever. Essentially, yes, they have your data, but there's no way to associate a person's name with it. But the New York Times showed that, I think they gave an instance of like a school teacher who, they were tracking her within yards at, the thing was like every 45 minutes or something like that. And she was the only one that lived at her house, drove to her place of work, and went to her gym, and so on and so forth. Like, you can strip the identifying information, but the amount of data that we're giving up, do you think that's enough? Because, you can definitely, like, if you know where a person lives and where they work, odds are, given thousands of people's data, you should be able to pick up a person's, data trail, right?
You hit the nail on the head. You're absolutely right. Because you think about it, What they're doing oftentimes is metadata, things associated to us that may not say Scott Schober, but the culmination of all these different data points and data sets give them a wealth of information. Just like you said, a breadcrumb trail, where we go, where we shop, where we work. Maybe it's the bar that you weren't supposed to be at last night or something else. Who knows? All of those things are kind of tells that somebody that's tracking you, and a lot of people quickly tell me, well, I really don't have anything private to hide. I'm not hiding anything. What's the big deal? Not true at all. We all do. When you think about it, nobody wants to be broken into our homes. Nobody wants our computers targeted or our network at work targeted. And all these things allow hackers the ability to get granularity, target us, and just collect our personal information and do all kinds of nasty things. So the less data you put out there, the less location information, the harder it is for somebody to use it against you. And that's really the point.
Yeah, yeah, and really, we talk about all these different companies that lose our data. They're obviously, hey, it's kind of the segment to show that you can trust these companies with your data. Like personally, I'll say right out of the gate, trying to get fit. Hey, it's going well. It's going very, very slow. But I trust, let's say, MyFitnessPal. It's a very popular app. And I let it track my location at all times. And it tells me, hey, Ben, you walked about 1,000 steps today. I'm like, thanks. I'm lazy. I know. And I work from home. What are you going to do? But I will say that, for it to measure that kind of thing, it measures, the sensors in my phone, it measures my GPS location, it measures me constantly. And I'm kind of okay with that, but at the same time, I know kind of what I'm getting up. And again, kind of to your point, if someone has not done their spring cleaning, if someone has not, cleaned their digital house in a while, let's say you downloaded and gave permission to MyFitnessPal when you were feeling motivated, let's say 2 Januaries ago, and you've just left it on your phone for 2 years, that's 2 years worth of metadata, location data, activity data that MyFitnessPal has been pooling and sucking and collecting about you. And that means that advertisers have a better picture of who you are than I think even your family would really know about you. It's certainly, and again, this is all coming from the New York Times article, it's eye-opening to really hear, oh, they track this. Well, we know that, but to actually see it in graphs, in charts, and things like that, it's spooky. So I'm glad that that News 12 reached out to you and you chose to speak on this subject.
Yeah, it was certainly fascinating, and I think a lot of the revelations in doing my research and then even talking with the reporter is how many people are just not realizing what they open their phone up to. They think it's so private. They don't realize when they downloaded, Pokemon or whatever, Candy Crush or this or that 2-3 years ago, and they leave it on there, that it's tracking and using all of that information, and they're allowing it to happen. And that to me was pretty amazing.
Yep, and hey, I actually just gave me an idea for an article, but and really, I do kind of want to put this in writing, and hey, even if you want to contribute a little bit to the article as I'm brainstorming right now, I mean, doing this for your smartphone is one thing with the apps and the settings and locations and reviewing where your data is going, that kind of thing, but this also applies to computers with tracking and different programs that you have. I mean, this is also happening really anything connected to the internet. Like, it's not just our phones, it's any website you visit, any services you use. Like, this is happening across all digital spectrums, isn't it?
Absolutely. Actually, that's a really good point, because you think about IoT, it's everywhere. IoT devices are exploding, and the use of them, especially holiday season, people are shopping, buying everything that's connected into the internet. Again, we have to just stop, pause, ask ourselves, what am I giving away? What am I trading? If I plug in this Google Home or Alexa or whatever else, a lot of these
I forgot about those.
Devices are great, but be careful.
Yeah, no, it truly is a wiretap within your home, but
yeah, exactly. Well said.
but like I said, yeah, and with like MyFitnessPal, I'm comfortable with it because I know what I'm getting and I find it convenient. But I know that I'm also sacrificing a lot for it. But hey, the genie's out of the bottle. Now it's just our job to mitigate, however, or really at least realize. So there's that one. Everyone, link in the show note to to the full interview that you have up there, and very, very cool to see you. Now let's go ahead, and this one's a YouTube video. You link here, and let's see.
Bring in Scott Schober.
There we go. Scott Schober. Hey, I know that person too. Here's a YouTube video.
We want to bring in Scott
Sorry
Schober.
about that. Yeah, we can actually play the whole video right here, but this is their video, so we'll just put a link to it. But yeah, it looks like you were on with Crossroads and really hacking. So hacking, obviously bad. And when that happens to a credit card company, when it happens to Sonic, oh no, they have my payment information and they know that I got a hot dog. This is horrible. But hacking, when it happens to, nuclear experts, that is also a problem. So this happening with Iran hacker. So personally, I haven't heard that much about state-sponsored hacking in a while. Like obviously, what's happened with Russia was social engineering, that kind of thing. But with Iran and North Korea, things like that, it seems to have taken a backseat to social media manipulation. What's going on? Nuclear experts are being targeted by Iranian hackers, or you put a question mark. What's going on here?
Yeah, this one is interesting because what one would think would be an elaborate scheme and difficult to actually target and hack into the different accounts of nuclear researchers, it really was a fundamentally simple attack where these hackers based out of Iran, again, probably state-sponsored there, were using a simple phishing scam. And what they were using was like Gmails. They were really targeting Gmail users. And what they would do is sending them it would say Google security alert. Click here, and everybody says, oh no, I have Gmail. There must be a problem. Let me click on here, and it would download malware. And they could then take over their account. They could harvest passwords. They could start reading private information. And again, that's where many users, even within the government, or should I say especially in the government, are still using free Yahoo and Gmail accounts, and they're using it for classified or confidential information. Well, that's a treasure trove for hackers, especially here where these Iranian hackers, they came across the list initially, so they had a nice focused targeted attack and the email addresses of nuclear researchers, and they could take it to the next level. So fundamentally, it was a simple phishing scam. People are still falling for it, even within the government, and even if they're brilliant researchers that harness the power of nuclear warfare, which is, to me, very, very, very concerning. So I think everybody needs to be on alert and be careful, not just for the traditional holiday scams and Amazon scams and everything else out there, but even within the government, especially people that have clearance and classified information that they're sharing, that they don't get duped into this and fooled.
Yeah, it's really you would really hope that someone as intelligent as, let's say, someone who's working on nuclear issues and is a researcher, like you said, obviously probably some kind of doctorate, very learned and educated, that, hey, don't click links. We say it all the time on the show. Don't click email links. Don't click email links. Don't click email links. If you have to, copy and paste it out of your email. And especially don't click links from sources that you don't trust. Now, you're saying that they did this by essentially disguising themselves as a security update for from Google, Gmail, whatever, trying to help people with their security. Has Google said anything about this? Like, has Google put out a notice saying we will never email you or we will never do this? Like, has there been any comment from Google other than, yeah, that's not us?
No, I haven't seen any official response from it other than their standard responses that they would say is, we would never send you an email with an attachment requesting you to click on it and redirecting you to another site, So the very standard language is really the response that you get. And what that tells us is large tech companies, they're plagued with this, especially when you have a huge customer base. You think of Google, I think of Facebook, you think of Twitter. Any of these large tech companies with big customer bases, they're going to be targets. So we have to all, as consumers, as business owners, just be savvy enough to be careful not to click on that email, no matter how convincing it looks. We say it again and again and again, and we'll probably say it one more time, but people are still falling for it.
Yeah.
And it's a problem.
Yeah, and I think that the problem here could also be the fact that, because this might be state-sponsored and, the fact that they had a very specific target in mind, I'm not saying that they would be, that I'm not saying that if they were just doing the basics, they wouldn't be safer, but let's face it, if they had, let's say, relatives, family members, wife, spouse, kids, something, and they were in, one of them in their immediate orbit were to fall for one of these phishing scams, then they were, given access to those email accounts, and then they could send an email from, let's say, the wife's email to the husband's, making it look like the wife sent that, saying, "Hey, click this. I want you to see this." I'm just saying that because it's so targeted, aren't there multiple ways that, if the first phishing scheme doesn't work, phishing is rather inexpensive. It's very easy to do. I mean, don't you think eventually one of them is going to slip through the cracks if, they're going to let their guard down at one point or another, that phishing is eventually going to work, probably?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of link it up there, phishing attacks and how effective they are to robocalls. I can't stand how many times my phone rings during the day, and half the time it's a robocaller. You subscribe to the do not call list. You try to do everything. You block it. You unsubscribe. You do everything you can, but you still keep getting barrages of them. Why? Because it works, and it's so cheap. To actually place a robocall is fractions and fractions of a penny. And in fact, I learned recently when they actually are placing these large volumes of calls, they actually will get a little bit of a kickback from the phone carrier for the large volume of intense usage of phone calls that they make. So they can actually start making money when they make enough calls, which is a very backwards way of thinking. Criminals making money using a service against us all to scam us, and yet the phone company's paying them indirectly. It's really scary.
I would assume that would be because a lot of legitimate companies back in the day used not email marketing, phone marketing, and I guess phone companies were trying to subsidize, companies say, "Hey, come do your phone marketing with us. It's cheaper than email." Trying to keep themselves relevant, but now they're just kind of feeding into the problem. So
yeah, kind of like the post office competing with email. I think the phone companies are doing the same thing, and they provide incentives to the bad guys, and they're happy because it helps their volume stay up and make it more affordable, apparently. And so it's a win-win for everyone. The bad guys, the phone companies, of course, not the consumers that are victims.
Very yeah, and there was a report that I think that like 1 out of every 2 phone calls, much like you experienced, but now nationwide, is a scam. So personally, I'm right there with you. I don't even answer my phone when it picks up, because I just wait for them to leave a message. If they leave a message, I'll call them right back. The 10 seconds the 10 seconds it takes for me to listen to their message is just me not confirming to the robocallers that this is a legitimate number. So
that's a good point. In fact, a nice thing too, and I use this on my iPhone. I'm not answering my phone often because I'm in the middle of something or what have you. But you could look at the transcription. It's transcribing the phone call, so you could quick read the first sentence. Usually, hey, do you want free home solar, an alarm system, something else? Delete. It saves you some time there. So it's getting better. We're still not there yet, but we've got to be vigilant there.
Got to be vigilant, and of course, that would be the article when you have a quick interview with you talking about the nuclear experts being targeted by the Iranian hackers, that kind of thing, be it Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, insert any other, or even many countries that are considered our allies. Everyone's just hacking everyone. It's cheap, efficient, and it's just something that you do. So
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing if I can, too,
sure,
Ben. I forgot to mention regarding the Iran hacking. It's believed or reported that the Iran hacking was most likely a direct result of President Trump reissuing sanctions against Iran. So one scary thing is, if you think about it now you've got world leaders that are taking a stance, a political stance or whatever, or defensive stance, and other countries can now respond instead of shooting rockets and missiles and guns or abducting people or terroristic things. They're using cyber because it's so powerful and so effective to hack and target and weaken other countries. So cyber warfare is becoming the number one tool of choice to get back at people. That, to me, is very concerning.
And will probably continue. And I have to say that I've definitely noticed that as well, where actually, that's not the point I wanted to make. The point I wanted to make was that social engineering, and even if you think it doesn't work for, let's say, military operations or government operations, it's a form of social engineering. But I recall a reporter getting on the phone with President Trump. This happened a couple months ago, I think, but he said that he was a reporter, or essentially he lied about who he was, and was put through on the phone with the president after like 5 minutes of just telling people and lying that essentially the president wanted to talk to him, and he was able to get in there. And that's social engineering over a telephone, and it worked like crazy. It worked like a charm. So it's going to keep happening. You're right, and there's going to be a lot of reasons for it. And hey, sanctions are definitely a big reason. But staying vigilant, that kind of thing, that's all well and good. Scott, not clicking email links, not downloading anything, always keeping ad block up, things like that. Those are all good. But what happens when a company like Facebook loses 6.8 million people's photos? And this is a weird one. And honestly, I don't think we've actually covered this one on the show before. So this is the first time that we're hearing about it. I know it's been reported elsewhere, but let's start with the basics. What happened with Facebook?
This was in a series of endless debacles that Facebook has been involved in. And full disclosure, I don't personally use Facebook. This is yet another reason why I don't like to use Facebook. But in this particular case, they exposed unwillingly private photos for this 6.8 million users, is believed. And again, this has to do with those that have third-party companies that have apps that can access portions of people's Facebook's profile. So they can get in there and see bits and pieces, but they shouldn't have access to the entire page that you put up there on Facebook. And what ended up happening, there was a bug, and it allowed them to see pictures that they were not granted access to. And some people might say, big deal, so they see my Uncle Henry drinking a beer or something that I have up on my page. But it's even more than that. The part that disturbed me was that you could take photos and upload it into Facebook, but never have them posted. Facebook accidentally allowed them to have access to all of those as well, because Facebook saved all those photos. So here's a photo you didn't even put up there that you'd ever want anyone to see, but you uploaded it at some point. And maybe it's a compromised photo. Maybe it's a photo you took that you just didn't want whoever, your significant other, to see. Here it is. Now it's up there for everyone to see. Big, big mistake. They received a notification. They patched and fixed the bug quickly, which was good. But again, they've got thousands of apps and app developers associated to these Facebook accounts that in turn had access to all of these photos. So oftentimes, people, especially unscrupulous, will download and pull all this stuff off, so later on they could sell, extort, trade, do whatever they want, sell it on the dark web. So basically, all the things that you posted up there on Facebook that you thought were private are not necessarily private, including those photos that you never posted real time on your timeline and such.
There are some very basic precautions you'd hope a company like Facebook would take, but as this article points out as well, that it's just one of those things that no one has ever really done what Facebook has done. I mean, yes, there are things like GeoCities and MySpace and what have you, but no one has ever had 1 billion active monthly users. No one has had 2 billion people on a service like this before. So one of the big things is the ability to start an app, log into the Facebook API and say that, hey, we're an app that turns your photos into photos with cat ears. And it's like, okay, that's great. So here's everyone's photos. Here's your access. Here's your key. Here's your developer's license, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And one thing I've noticed is just that, and maybe you can comment on this, but why do you think Facebook has been so lackadaisical about granting permission for music. So why do you think Facebook, and when we come back, we'll talk about this, why you think Facebook has been so lackadaisical about actually giving permissions to the right people? And so, Scott, stay put. Everyone else, more Computer America right after this. Stay tuned. And hey, we'll be right back. More Scott Schober, author of Hacked Again, cybersecurity expert. Everyone, stay tuned.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
Welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And everyone, we continue on with, of course, Scott Schober, cybersecurity expert. And, of course, you can find his website at scottschober.com. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. But real quick, if you missed any part of today's conversation so far, feel free to check us out wherever podcasts are heard. And, of course, hey, you can hear today's show in its entirety rebroadcast. So, Scott, again, right before the break, we were about to get into, or at least I was about to ask you, I mean, so many of these hacks, of these, just a little while ago, it was all about Cambridge Analytica. It was it really seems like every bad thing that's happened with Facebook, excluding management issues, and I'm not going to get into those, but when it comes to hacking, social engineering, whatever, most of them have to do with the fact that Facebook is giving carte blanche permissions to app developers and, letting them download essentially the entirety of Facebook when it comes to pictures, locations, birthdays, names, addresses. Like, it seems like Facebook really does have a problem oversharing. And I'm not talking about its users. I'm talking about Facebook, the company.
Absolutely. They unfortunately, their business model is selling our personal information, selling our likes, selling for ad revenue, if you think about it. So, and with all of these breach after breach, compromise after compromise, mistake after mistake, I think the problem is they're just so big. It's going to keep happening. They can't keep on top of it. They say they'll hire more people, post-Cambridge Analytica,
You can't hire your
and
way
every
out of
time
this.
there's a breach, hire, increase security, improve. But it keeps happening. Why? Well, they are Goliath and they're going to be a target. That's number one. But we're hearing so many breaches, we're almost complacent or numb because it's breach fatigue. It's every month there's another Facebook compromise story that we hear. And theoretically, when you hear of a breach, most companies react. They beef up security. They'll increase the level of attention to it, and they'll make it stronger. Hopefully that's what's happening as people see that they keep getting breached, that they're actually taking active steps in the background to keep our personal data safe, especially those that are regular Facebook users. But the jury is still out. I don't personally place enough trust in them, or Mark Zuckerberg, that he would keep my personal information safe on my page on Facebook. That's one of the reasons why I stay off the platform.
So, and obviously, I'm still on Facebook, and a lot of it has to do with just the fact that, for the business, you got to take the chance. But I got to say that my question to you regarding this would be, would you feel better about Facebook if they told you? Like for me, I've been using Facebook more over the past couple of weeks just to try to dig myself back in. I've stopped using it as much, trying to jump back in. It's not easy, but like when this hack came out, I didn't hear about it from Facebook. Facebook did not send me a message saying, "Hey, we had a security breach. 6.8 million photos were stolen," and they did not put out a sentence anywhere in my timeline or feed or notifications that said, "You are not one of the affected users," or "You are one of the affected users." Facebook is having a problem, and I'm saying Facebook, but I think a lot of the industries, tech, social media, everyone in general has a problem alerting people that they are affected by these security breaches. It's kind of like when they have recalls on, let's say, cars or dog food or something like that. You actually getting the information to these people that you are or are not affected seems to be really not a priority for these companies.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because one thing that I've always been pondering about is part of the reason that we don't get the alerts often when there's breaches with certain tech companies is because there's a very blurry line as far as what their business is. If you think about Facebook, what is Facebook? Is Facebook a tech company? Is Facebook an advertiser? To me, they're really an advertiser. They're selling ads in trade for a convenience service that is wonderful and it's great for businesses.
Google. Yeah.
And Google is the same thing. So when you look at that close, you have to ask yourself, where is their loyalty? Is it to their advertisers, or is it to the raw customer base, the users whose information is being sold?
So now the obvious question is, Scott, obviously, with all this reporting that we just did on this breach, so how are you enjoying your Facebook portal? I'm assuming you have 3 to 4 in your house, blanketing your family. No, probably not.
No.
Okay. All right. There was never a good time to bring up the Facebook portal, and the fact that they just had this breach on the tail of numerous breaches before this, I have no idea how that product is ever going to, like, they finally started advertising on TV. Like, they announced it, and then they waited 2 months, and they finally started to advertise it, and obviously you don't recommend it. I don't recommend it, but man,
no.
Poor Facebook.
And I think it's like what was it? Google Plus also, I think, announced recently that they're going to be shutting that down. There's so many different avenues these large tech companies take and trials that they do. They put it out there, they play with it and see if it sticks, if it makes them money or not. And they can afford to do it because they're making billions in revenue. So for them, it makes sense because all you got to get is 1 out of every 100 that's a success, and you can really monetize on it. But we're the guinea pigs, and that's the part that bothers me because it's our information, that our digital footprint that's getting exposed more and more, and it's out there and it's hard to erase.
Yeah, Google Plus recently announced because and like I don't even follow Google Plus because I'm not sure if we talked about this with you, but the first quote unquote breach that Google Plus had, I think the media really got their teeth into it and shook it like crazy when they shouldn't have, because Google found a vulnerability in their API, just like Facebook's API led to this, but they found a security breach in their API during routine penetration testing, where they hired an inside company and they patched it before anyone in the wild was able to actually take advantage of the vulnerability. Like I'm glad that they announced it. I'm sorry that they got hit for it, and that is the exact right thing a company should do. But still, people lash on that. Facebook was Google Plus was hacked. That wasn't the case. And I think the second time around, they found another vulnerability the same way, and they announced that they're going to be closing down 3 months early. It's Google Plus. Like, don't get me wrong, no one was using Google Plus. No one was using Google Plus, so I'm not really sad about it. It's just even when companies do things right, which I think Google did in that case, it just shows that it's still not easy to do this right. By any means. So, anyways, there's that. We're gonna go ahead and swap over. And by the way, someone in the chat room wanted to know what Facebook Portal was, and I'm not sure if you want to answer that, Scott, or if I'll just answer real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Facebook Portal, think of it like an Alexa or some kind of digital assistant, but instead it's they try to position it as kind of a smart speaker, but at the same time, it's this huge, bulky tablet that you set up, they say, in your kitchen or living room, wherever you socialize. And think of it like Skype calls, but Facebook calls. And it's to talk to family members. It's to socialize with people on Facebook, where instead of texting on your phone, you put them on the portal. It's like a portal into their house, and you get to socialize. And the entire time, it's Facebook's operating system behind it. So they're collecting everything they're probably recording your video calls, they're transcribing your calls, they are checking who you talk to, how long you talk to them. Overall, it's just Facebook's way of data mining even more from you, and it's pretty blatant because it's not really an asked-for product. So that's what Portal is. It's essentially a big video calling platform from Facebook. But there you go. Okay, now from that one, and go ahead, move on. So this is another part that we have that we talked about, and honestly, we've had a lot of companies on the show. Everyone from Intel to, we just had a company on. Let me see. Their company just had them on last week. I am so sorry if you're listening that I forgot the name, but let's see. Last week it was Reflare. There we go. We had them on a week ago. Reflare, they have a set of standards for cybersecurity training, for different positions. Essentially, training in cybersecurity, there's a lot left to be desired. There's certifications you can get. There are programs at colleges and universities you can do. But overall, and this is something I wanted to point out to you, was that whenever we hear about, someone being hired by these, by government agencies, 3-letter agencies, or these big companies, a lot of the time they're, homegrown hackers. They are people who took an interest in self-taught, self-educate, and they are recruited by these organizations because they've shown some kind of affinity towards hacking or cybersecurity, usually from the wrong end of it, but they're still within the field. Education, formal education, when it comes to cybersecurity, has never really shined very brightly in the industry. So, talk about this article you found. Education ranked worst at cybersecurity out of 17 major industries. Why?
Yeah, well, number one, there's not enough cybersecurity awareness and education still, despite all the breaches and hacks and everything else we hear about being taught within schools and universities. It's starting to come around. And this article is delving in a little bit how on top of that, look at the results. In other words, hackers are targeting universities because they themselves are not implementing sound cyber practices. They're targeting students. They're targeting the education industry as a whole because the education industry is not staying on top of protecting people's data. They're far behind. So in one way, it's kind of ironic. The very schools that people look for to get degrees in education and the latest and greatest in technology, advancement, security are not providing it, and they themselves are being targets because they're not doing a good enough job. They're doing a terrible job is really what this article is saying. So it's really an eye-opener to me. It's saying that all education needs to understand that there's got to be a degree of best practices implemented in educating students and staff throughout an institution so they can go out into the world and stay safe. But even within the institution alone, since they're getting targeted and falling victim to hackers, they need to spend the money and the right money to beef up their networks to stay safe and protect information for students and faculty.
I completely misunderstood the title of it. I was going off just reading the title. The title. So you're saying that education, colleges, universities, things like that, their cybersecurity practices are some of the worst.
Exactly.
When it comes,
yes. They're targets because they're terrible at keeping it secure.
Why do you think that matters? Because obviously, and you know, when you look at the possible data leaks that they may have, or possible treasure troves of data that they may have, it's going to be everything associated with, with I guess students and college students and that kind of thing. I mean, I guess my question is, what is the worst thing that can happen out of this? Is it just that? I don't know. Obviously, the inner workings of education, they don't want them out there, and that's another thing. But what kind of danger does this pose to the students who are just starting to get their careers off the ground?
Well, I think it's to some degree preying on those that perhaps are a little bit more naive or innocent. And I don't want to make a blanket statement that all students are, but especially maybe in the younger grades where they're being targeted. In university, you would hope that they have enough knowledge base and mature enough not to fall for a phishing attack. However, the university is one of the most successful places to launch a phishing attack toward the staff, the faculty, and students, and they click on the attachments. Blows my mind, but it's happening more and more. And in part, it's because hackers realize that the toolkits to create phishing emails are really good now. They're using good graphics. They load fast. The click and the redirect, if it fools you up in the browser, you don't read it, so it looks like you're actually going to Bank of America and not another dummy site that's about to steal your information, or it's not malware that's being downloaded. So the hackers up their game significantly, and it's easy when you've got a .edu education email address there, and anybody could buy a university email directory or all of them for a matter of hundreds of dollars. So the point of paying to get in and to buy into it and start by a targeted email list is pretty simple. And you know what targeted topics to talk about. What do students hate? It's probably tuition things. It's probably the importance of getting an affordable car loan, how to get books. Use things that will be targeted to somebody that they're more likely to click on and be convincing. It's going to work every time, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, they certainly have. I mean, even I come across some emails, and luckily they're mostly caught by spam, but you always have to check your spam every once in a while, and I'm kind of shocked sometimes when I see emails that look very legitimate. They definitely give me pause. So speaking of which, this actually seems like a pretty good topic to roll over into the Hirschevek group, and this has to do with the 2019 official annual cybercrime report. So again, it seems kind of related with education ranked worst as cybersecurity, and some organization out there has to put out a a report to track everything, to track damages and the monetary value of all these hacking and things like that. I mean, the Hershevek Group, they're pretty well known. Talk about the annual report. Have you had a chance to look at it, or has the group put out some highlights? What caught your eye about this report?
Yeah, actually, I have had a chance to look through some of it. I haven't done a deep dive yet, and I'm looking forward to it over the winter break. But it's got some real eye-openers to me, talking just how bad cybercrime is. And this, again, is, I guess, Hershevek Group is sponsoring this, and it's put out by Cybersecurity Ventures. And they basically, over the course of a year, through researchers are collecting data. It's a pretty comprehensive report, and it's very well respected. And I think that's one of the important things. It's not just a bunch of made-up numbers that they took somebody else's and just exaggerated, which unfortunately many reports are. So this you can actually try to trust into, but it helps you to see where we are now in the stream of times and where it's starting to go, just based upon the number of Internet users. A nice stat is brought in there. It mentions there were about 4 billion Internet users in 2018, which is about half the world's population. And kind of extrapolating that where it's going to go. So it helps us to see that it's exploding. It's doubling every couple of years, even though the population is not increasing that much. What's telling us is soon everybody will be on the Internet because computers are getting cheaper, and probably even more importantly, smartphones are getting cheaper, and they're getting into the hands of the masses now. In third world countries where they couldn't have much communication with traditional landlines even, they can get an affordable, low-cost phone and an affordable service, and they can have connectivity not just via phone, wireless, but they can connect into the Internet. And I think that's changing the way that cybercrime will work. Now cybercrime can target these billions of new Internet users that really never had access because maybe they couldn't afford a computer or their age or whatever the case may be. That's kind of scary when you read stats and start to understand things like that. So lots of cool eye-openers like that. Another one that does stand out, and I'll just mention briefly, was it talked about Cisco. That their thought, and they were quoted that cloud data centers are going to represent about 95% of the total data centers by 2021. That's just a couple years away. So in other words, what that's telling us is cloud computing is going to, in essence, take over data centers altogether in just the next 3 to 4 years. That's powerful. That's a pretty profound statement when we think about where we are now and where our data will be housed in the future.
Well, and that means a couple of things. Like the first one, if you're looking at, earlier we mentioned things like Google being able to put out Google+. Essentially, they were able to try experimental things in other industries because one industry, they are so dominant in a specific industry. When you tell me that 95% of data will be held in the cloud, or data servers will be cloud, that tells me that who are the big competitors in that field? Amazon. I think it's Amazon, Microsoft, and there's a third one that I can't really recall off the top of my head. But essentially, that means that Amazon is going to be making a lot of money and be able to do a lot more things in different industries. So essentially, I guess companies like Intel and other companies used to make, deal with their own cloud infrastructure, but now they just offload it to Microsoft or Amazon or one of these other companies. Google, I think, is actually one of the other ones. And that tells me that, data being secure, or at least the idea that, you have a closed system that is harder to penetrate, that's going to be impossible now that every company is going to be holding their data on other people's hardware. Yeah,
and I think if you look at it, these Goliath companies, as you were mentioning, some of them, you got Amazon Web Services, you got Microsoft, the Google Cloud Platform, I think is what they call it, but even other companies like Adobe, VMware, IBM Cloud, that they're huge in the space, Rackspace, Red Hat, the list goes on and on, how many large dominant cloud providers there now are, which kind of shifts greatly the the targets where these hackers might now try to prey to get data. They may not try to connect into the particular pipe in a data center as they used to. Now they may try to target these cloud providers in a different way, which again house and hold our data that we're paying them to keep secure. So it changes the dynamics significantly, and that's what I was thinking is kind of interesting. Some of the takes in reading these reports. Yeah. Another, just a brief a quote that was in the report that kind of stood out, and I jotted down. It said, "Cybercrime is the greatest threat to every company in the world, and one of the biggest problems with mankind." That's a pretty bold statement. And I start thinking about it, and maybe years ago it would be hard to say something like that, but now every person I talk to, be it in the world of business or even personal, is somehow affected with cybercrime one way or another. So it's true. It really has become the greatest threat to a business and on a personal level to all of us. Really concerning going forward.
I couldn't agree more. Although taking some of these stats that you've been throwing out from this report, it actually is kind of hopeful in my eyes. Like the one that you said about there's going to be 4 billion internet users. If you think humanity has come a long way with with only 1 billion internet users, with 2 billion internet users, imagine how diverse and bountiful an internet could be with twice as many people thinking of ideas, putting up websites, making services, putting up artwork, putting up all these kinds of things. Yes, there's the cybersecurity aspect, which obviously we are going to focus on, but there's also the humanity aspect that gives me a lot of hope that, hey, the more people who are connected, the more ideas that float out there, and hey, maybe one of those ideas is going to change everything. So
yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I ask myself, how many times do I go onto the internet and watch a YouTube video when something breaks in my house? Yeah. I do it all the time. And I say, why do I need to hire someone? I'd like to learn how to fix it. I enjoy tinkering and using my hands and learning what makes my HVAC tick and what makes, how do I set this TV up with surround sound or configure a computer, whatever the case may be. The internet allows people, and as you mentioned, mankind in general, to learn and to share information. It does happen to be a repository of bad people putting junk there and stealing junk and other things too, but that's not everything. It's not all bad, so it's good that it's expanding to the greater mankind, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. Imagine if America was first starting out with the Industrial Revolution and everyone had access to, how do I start my business? How do I grow my business? How do I, run these machines? Imagine that. And that's what, these third world countries are going to be coming up with. They're going to be able to leapfrog into industries that they want. But hey, and just trying to put a nice cheery bow on this because it is the holidays and we want to be able to do that. So, Scott, we have time for just one more article. Let's actually. I'm using Twitter more and more. Let's talk about Twitter real quick. And, we beat up on Facebook and we beat up on Google. Talk about Twitter because they're not immune to this either.
Now, in this particular case, in short, a bug was discovered that Twitter admitted to there, and they discovered some suspicious traffic. Really, it was associated to a customer support form, and as they were investigating this, I guess, to expose some different data was exposed, I guess you could say, such as users' private information. There were some country codes, some details that were exposed on lock accounts, and so on and so forth. So there was a number of things that were opened up, and basically they feel that based upon the investigation, looking at the IP addresses, a lot of it originated some of this hacking probably out of China, could have been out of Saudi Arabia. But what it really is helping us to see is whether it's specifically hackers or they're state-sponsored actors, which they're still trying to determine and clarify. Nobody is free from hacking. All of these social media platforms are. So I encourage people, be careful how much personal information you do put out there. I always encourage people, when you're setting up your Twitter account, or even if you want to go back, check your profile. Don't put your actual birth date. Don't put too much details of your actual whereabouts, where you live.
That's something
out
that
there.
I wish that we could tell people more and more. And as much as your parents told you lying is bad, you don't owe anything to Twitter, to Facebook, to Computer America. You don't owe anything to anyone. Lie about, cut your last name in half or change your first name. I mean, lie. It's going to protect you in the long run. But Scott, music playing in the background means that we're just about done for today. If people want to find out more about you, and hopefully they aren't lying, where can they go?
Great. Thanks for being on there, Benny.
I'm sorry, 1 second. There we go. Scott, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So if people want to find out more, where can they go?
They can certainly go to my website, scottschober.com, and I got a ton of articles, information, blogs, and you can shoot me an email with any questions. Certainly, I'd be happy to answer.
All right, perfect. And everyone will have a link to that in the show notes. And Scott, one last time, if you want to say happy holidays to everyone, Merry Christmas, please go for it.
Thank you. And I want to point out, stay safe, everyone out there. Be careful. There's a lot of phishing scams going on, especially during this holiday season. So please stay safe.
Perfect. And hey, we're looking forward to another long year with you next year. And Scott, again, thank you for coming on.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Have a great one. Bye-bye. And everyone else out there, thank you for tuning in to Computer America. It's been great, and we are, of course, going to be back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Everyone, have a great one. Bye-bye.